Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's July the 17th, 2026, and this is episode 102. Awesome. I love it. We're coming to you live from Tulsa, and I am so excited to be here with you tonight. Tonight's guest, Kathryn Avery, is somebody that I'm very, very happy that I'm going to be able to introduce you to this lady. She's somebody very, very special, and you're going to see it. And that's the one thing that excites me about doing a podcast is that I get to introduce you to people that probably ordinarily you would never even know exist on the planet. And you talk about somebody that's inspirational in the first responder world for sure. And we'll talk a lot about a lot of things tonight. And her candidness and about her personal journey is pretty amazing. Hello, everybody. Hello to Steph and Karen and Danny, all of the crowd, Darren. The regulars, the OGs, the people that are in here each and every week. I love it. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you all very much. Like I say every time, this show is not a show without you. And this is why I like doing live shows, because it's electric and you guys make it that way. And I appreciate it. I had an intruder in my house over the last few days. And I know that's kind of spooky and scary. And let me just kind of, now that I've got your attention, my wife brought it to my attention about our doggy door that had been getting gnawed on. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but, and so I just was like, okay, I don't know what's happening here. And then in the early morning hours, when I get up to go to work about 4 a.m, I heard a crash and a bang in my living room. And I really didn't think much of it because I thought it was Tina doing something in the living room and knocked into something. And it wasn't her, and it wasn't me. And what it was, it's probably a squirrel that decided to come into my house. And I am not for sure if this squirrel is still in this house or not, but I'm going to tell you something, not to offend anybody, but I did some research on a nice little concoction to introduce to this squirrel because and I don't know if the thing decided to dine in and get some of that stuff that I'd mixed up, which by the way is baking soda and Jiffy cornbread mix. And because it doesn't hurt the animal, it doesn't hurt your dogs. And when you come into the house, there's going to be a problem. And so my uninvited intruder, and I don't do rodents, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I just don't do it. So hopefully that thing got a taste of that and decided to leave out the door. And I don't know, but crazy. And right here in freaking Tulsa. And it's the life I live, ladies and gentlemen. What do you do? So anyway, it's going to be a great show tonight. I don't want to waste any of her time. She's up in Golden, Colorado, which is like heaven. It's beautiful up there. And hopefully she's going to be safe from all these forest fires and stuff that's going on up in there. Karen is a former founder and executive director of Restoration Ranch in Colorado, a 501c3 providing respite opportunities to members of first responders agencies and department. Her passion and purpose is educating, advocating, and agitating on behalf of first responders and their families. Her commitment to this pursuit was born of tragedy. And that's going to be a story she's going to talk about, which happened to be the killing of her husband, Chris, by 3 robbery suspects fleeing from police. Kathryn is a role model of resilience, determination, and drive. She is living proof that someone can survive unthinkable tragedy and lead a meaningful life filled with passion and purpose. Welcome, Kathryn, to the show.
You.
I tell you what, I got to tell you, sometimes I come across things and I'm kind of playing around on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's is a great spot to find people to come on here. And I happen to come across, I think she friended me. I don't even know how the heck you came across me, but you did. And so I just kind of started researching her. And then I thought, this is interesting. I'm reading kind of what she does. And then I looked her up and then I watched, I was watching a podcast that you had done and I couldn't stop watching it. I was just like glued to it. And it was the one that you did with Mr. Blyleven. And it was great. I don't know if he's related to the other pitcher, Bert Blyleven. I would think that they would be. Really?
It's his son. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's even cooler. So I didn't know, because I remember watching his dad play in the World Series way back in the day. And so I was like, they have to be related. But that was such a good podcast. And then I watched some other stuff that you were involved in and so forth. So tell us who you are and how did you end up getting involved on this journey that you're on?
First of all, thank you for having me today. I am so excited to be able to share everything that I've been through for the last 6 years. And like I said, tonight, there's nothing that's off limits with me. If people have questions, you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. But the story started on December the 4th of 2020. We were about to go into another COVID lockdown. My husband, Chris, and I realized, hey, if we're not going to be able to go to the grocery store, we better get an order in. My 96-year-old at the time father had been living with Chris and me. He recently moved into a house 3 doors down from us, so he could be, and as Chris would describe it, his private memory care facility with hot and cold running caretakers, so that we could kind of get back to having a life, because Dad had been living with us for 4 years, and that was just an interesting experience. We were in the middle of renovating our home, something that everybody seems to have done during COVID. And we were getting ready to do this. And Chris and I are like the 1% of the population in the United States that likes fruitcake. And I was doing what I call a gluttonous advent. I was baking 25 different kinds of cookies. And I found a recipe for fruitcake cookies. And the ingredient citron is the candied fruit. The grocery store closest to me was out of it, so I switched the order to a different grocery store. I'm an intuitive. That's something we haven't talked about, but I am. And as we were sitting finalizing the grocery list, the little voice in my head went off and said, make sure you kiss him goodbye. And so before Chris got up to leave, I went over, he was sitting at our island in the kitchen. I went up and I kissed him on the back of the neck. And I said, do you know how much I love you? And he said, yeah, I do. I'll be back soon. And those were our last words to each other. So Chris leaves and goes to the grocery store. He is at an intersection at First and Harlan. At the time he's leaving, 3 robbers were in the Ulta Beauty store in Belmar Commons. They weren't the brightest crayons in the box. They had robbed this store previously, were immediately recognized when they walked in, but this time they exhibited menacing behavior, acting as though they had weapons. And this store is, I am not lying, less than 100 yards from the Lakewood, Colorado police headquarters. So it was called in as an armed robbery in progress. There was a massive police response, which initiated a high-speed chase, which the department called off when the robbers were driving the wrong way through traffic on Alameda Avenue, a major thoroughfare. They turned off on Harlan across street and were doing between 70 and 80 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood. How do we know this? Ring doorbell footage. Chris was at the intersection. The light turned green. He was T-boned. Our car was pushed about 35 feet sideways. And actually, that's the robber's car. That's actually not our car. Our car is further down the road. But the driver's side door was at the midline of the car. The front axle was broken, and Chris died at the scene. And before that day, I kind of glibly say my only interaction with the first responder community was calling 911 for other people and well-deserved speeding tickets from my local police department. So I knew nothing really about the first responder world. We're both civilians. No one in my family was a first responder. And what absolutely appalled me was the number of people who asked me if I was going to sue the police department. And my response was, and always will be, why on earth would I do that? Secondly, by the grace of God, I mean, I've worked as a journalist, so I've been on the other side of this experience. If I had watched the 5 o'clock news that night, I would have watched my husband die on television before I had been notified by the police that he was dead. That didn't happen. And so Chris was not really tech savvy. And so I thought, well, let me find him using Find My iPhone. And of course, he hadn't activated it. So I'm sitting at the desk trying to figure out in our front office, which is at the front of the house, and trying to figure out, okay, how do I locate him? It was rolling right to voicemail. He wasn't answering my texts. And that is not the relationship I have with my husband.
Yeah, because you were hearing like helicopter and sirens and
So I used to be a professional craft designer, and I'm highly competitive. And I had won our neighborhood's holiday lighting contest 3 years in a row, or 2 years in a row. And Chris was like, go for a hat trick. So I was literally out in our garage building this 8-foot angel that was the centerpiece of the display. And I will never forget this as long as I live. At 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, my whole body shook. And I thought, something just happened to Chris. And I thought, he's just going to the grocery store. It's not a big deal. And then I started hearing the sirens and helicopters. And I thought, wow, something big is going on. Obviously had no idea. So fast forward to later that evening, and I'm sitting and I see 4 people come up and stand on my front porch. And I thought, that's really weird. It's awfully late for solicitors. By that time, it was about 8 o'clock at night. He had left at 1:30 in the afternoon. And what was amazing to me, too, was when I called the non-emergency number to report that my husband should have been home an hour and a half ago, and I couldn't reach him, I was connected to a wonderful man who, I said, my husband should have been home hours ago. I'm not getting through to him. And he asked me, what's your license plate? What's your car look like? Blah, blah, blah. He was amazing. He was a Kathryn, I promise I will keep you informed. I'm going to give you my cell phone number so that you can call me. Before, I guess it was around 4:30 or 5, it was starting to get dark. And I thought, maybe Chris had a medical emergency. I'm going to go drive to the grocery store and see if he picked up the groceries. And I went up and down every single aisle in the parking lot, couldn't find his car. I went over to where he would have picked them up and asked if he came. And the guy was like, no, he never came and got them. And I immediately called this man back and said, okay, I'm pretty sure my husband's dead. And he's like, why do you say that? I said, he never got the groceries. Kathryn, I promise we will keep you posted on what's happening. So again, all of these things unfurl. And I'll circle back to this because again, as civilians, we don't understand why information isn't immediate. And I now know the answer to that. So we'll talk about that. So these 4 people are on my front porch and there's a knock at the door. I open the door and there are 2 police officers and 2 women. And they said, may we come in? And that little voice in my head said, make sure you're sitting down. So I went over and actually sat in the seat where Chris had been. And I just looked at him and I said, is he dead? And they said, yes, he was a traffic accident. And literally, I was grateful because I had called friends and said, hey, something's not right. I think Chris has been in an accident. Something's going on. And a friend of mine who is a therapist said, do you want me to come over? And I said, yeah. And she literally followed the police in. She just happened to arrive at that time. And it's just like you see in the movies. When you hear that, yes, he's dead, your brain can't process the information. And I literally heard wah, wah, wah as people are talking. I'm not understanding anything. Yeah. So I was grateful that Barbara was there taking notes. But one of the officers got a call, excused himself, went into the office, shut the door, and was on the phone for about 20 minutes. And when he came out, he said, Kathryn, I can now tell you what happened. And he explained that there had been a robbery, there had been a pursuit. And I was just like, my world crumbled. It just crumbled. And I was so pissed off because people went on my website, on my Facebook page, used pictures without my permission, and I was furious. But one television station in town sent me an email and said, "We are so sorry for your loss. We would like to do a story about Chris." And I said, "I'll tell you what, I will give you access to photos and information that nobody else has, but I'm sending you a letter. And when I know you have read that letter, then we'll talk." And in the letter, I said, as a journalist, you need to remember that families may not know circumstances around the death of their loved one, and you're reporting it and making suppositions and not giving factual information, but what you think has happened traumatizes us. And therefore, this, and what was absolutely fascinating to me was the news director called me back and said, "Would you be willing to read your letter as the basis of our coverage?" Because I also asked people to do acts of service in memory of my husband. And I was blown away. I did it. I'll send you the link so that people can watch the coverage. It's not on their website anymore, but I have a copy of the video and they've said I can share it. But I said, I made a decision to not have this ruin my life and to honor Chris's memory by doing something. And in these acts of service, I got notes from more than 500 people telling me what they had done to remember Chris. And you have to remember, this is in the middle of COVID. Like, nobody's doing anything.
Yeah.
So fast forward, Chris died in December. On March 19th of 2021, my dad passed away. And I'm the only surviving member of my family. That's a whole nother episode that we'll talk about sometime. But I thought Chris was going to have a milestone birthday in 2021. I don't want to celebrate it by myself. So I called my buddy who had been on the phone with me the day of Chris's killing. And I said, "Can I bring food from Chris's favorite restaurants to roll call to celebrate Chris's birthday?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great." So the day before I call and I'm like, "So when do I show up and where?" And he's like, "Oh my God, you're really going to do that?" And I was like, "Yes." And I would just, again, I didn't understand the suspicious and skeptical nature of many first responders, that you get lied to constantly. So when somebody actually follows through and does what they say they're going to do, that's a surprise. And I go to first roll call, and the day before, unbeknownst to me, a 14-year-old boy had stabbed his mother more than 30 times. The officer first on scene is there talking in graphic and uncensored language about what happened, because the paramedics couldn't get there right away because there was another accident. Anyway, it was a mess. And my brain is going, why is he at work? And when I was finally able to pose that question to command staff, I was told, well, he doesn't want to be at home thinking about this by himself. He may not want or need mental health counseling at this point in time, and there's no other place for him to go. And I thought, that is fundamentally wrong on so many levels. I just can't believe that. I'm going to do something about it. So initially, my intention was to donate time at a vacation rental property that my husband and I had in Maine. And I connected with the local fraternal order of, well, I called the police station. I said, how do I donate time at my house in Maine to your agents? And I was told, I don't know, let me call you back. So the next day she's like, well, it can't be a direct donation because that's a bribe and we don't want to put you in jail. So let's have you meet with our FOP rep and talk about it. So we meet at a Starbucks, and he walks in, we sit down, and the first words out of his mouth are, "What do you want?" I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "What do you want?" And my head's reeling. I'm like, I don't want anything. And he's like, you have to want something. And I said, well, how about I want to say thank you for everything that you've done for me.
Yeah.
And he was stunned. And so I told him about the idea of doing the house, and the police department couldn't accept it because the trials hadn't happened yet. They didn't want anything to affect the optics of Chris's
Right.
trials. And so I said, I have this really crazy idea. I said, I want to create a ranch where first responders and their families can go and relax, rest, and recharge at no cost. And he said, that doesn't exist. And I said, I know. I'm going to start it. And what I did was I chose to use the inheritance from my father to purchase a 40-acre ranch in Golden Gate Canyon. And we created Restoration Ranch, Colorado. During the time we were open, we hosted more than 1,000 first responders and their families to come for overnight stays. And the more I learned, the angrier I got at my ignorance about what first responders go through. So that's my Genesis story, which is kind of long-winded, but thank you for letting me share it.
No, I love it. I think it's an unbelievable journey, honestly. Shocking in many ways. I think a little divine intervention to protect you from finding the wreck. And I know that you've talked about that previously, where just by chance you didn't happen across that, which kind of shielded you from that.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of moments in your life that have kind of prepared you, because a lot of people were like, how are you even able to stand? And you had been through quite a bit in your life up to that point, almost preparing you for grief. I mean, you've been through grief many times. And so you didn't even touch upon that, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that have happened there. So you end up you end up purchasing this property,
which wasn't for sale, by the way.
Okay.
So, one of the many hats that I've worn over the years is a home stager. And I had staged the property for sale. Now I guess it's 7 or 8 years ago. And when I was looking for property, I started up in Estes Park, but all the billionaires have pushed the millionaires out of so many communities, and they've all gone to Estes Park and bought up everything. I couldn't afford it. So I was like, okay, the right and perfect property will show up. And literally, I woke up in the middle of the night, sat up in bed and went, oh my God, what about that ranch you staged in Golden Gate Canyon? So the next morning I called the realtor who I'd worked with, and I said, whatever happened to Bert's Ranch? And she said, it's the weirdest thing, Kathryn. I've been a realtor for 40 years. I've only had 2 properties not sell. One was a gentleman who decided that he really didn't want to move, and the other was Bert's property. And I said, well, I know why it didn't sell. And she said, why? I said, because I'm buying it. And she's like, what? And so I told her what I wanted to do. And she started to sob. And she said, I've never told you, but my husband's an ex-cop. And I went, oh my God. Okay. So again, you'd want to hear like really amazing serendipity. And it's not serendipity. It's just God's fingerprints all over everything.
Sure.
So the very first person who came to work with me at the nonprofit was the daughter of the ranch owner. Before Chris was killed, I was a retirement readiness expert and have written books about retirement readiness. And I had marketed it through financial planners. And Kat and I are sitting in the ranch kitchen, just chatting because we don't really know each other that well. And her husband has passed away. And she is talking about her husband who works with another man, Bob Hawsey. I was like, wait, your husband is Bob Patterson who works with Bob Hawsey? And she's like, yes. And I said, I've met your husband. They used my book to market their financial planning services. And she was like, oh my God, it gets weirder. She said, well, I've never told you this. I said, what? She said, before Bob became a financial planner, he was a latent print examiner for the Lakewood Police Department.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Small
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. You can't.
When they heard your story, I mean, I'm sure he was just like, oh, this is meant to be.
Yeah. And first Bert was a little skeptical, but I love Bert. He's an old cowboy. And he's like, go get your ducks in a row. So I got my ducks in a row and we were able to purchase the ranch. We renovated it. I had to laugh because the reason it didn't sell was he didn't do a single thing that I told him to. But that was great because it just gave me this beautiful blank canvas. And I purchased it on March the 4th of 2022. We opened in August of 2022. And unfortunately, we had to close our doors on May 31st of this year because we couldn't come up with sustainable funding, which to me, again, is a referendum on the ignorance of the general public as to why we need to support initiatives like this.
Well, and that's not the only thing that you kind of had your hands in. And I don't know what the status of this is either, but the Valor Vacations.
So Valor Vacations, yeah, that started off originally as a nominated program where people would be nominated by their agency. And that like I said, I keep on learning. I learned so much. First of all, I learned that most first responders do not like to be singled out for recognition. What they do is just the job. And so when somebody would be nominated, everybody would say there's somebody else that deserves it more than I do. So it was like pulling teeth to get people to take vacations. And then it evolved and morphed into many different things. And we were about to launch Valor Vacations USA as a website to raise funds for Restoration Ranch, Colorado when we closed. And that is now on a back burner. It's still getting ready to function, but that's not my first priority right now. So,
well, but there's a possibility that maybe both will be re-explored.
Absolutely. Just like, okay, so I think there is no box inside my head to think outside of. I just don't have a box. So one of the things that I always thought would be a great idea would be to create a beer.
Yeah, I saw that news footage of it.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because that's really cool.
Yeah. So again, one of my board members who was on the invited me to go to the gala for the School of Hospitality at Metro State University. One of the auction items that night to raise money was to work with their world-class brewmaster to create a beer for a private party. So me being me, I bid on it. I was the only person to bid on it. So for $400, I got to create my own beer. And I went in and worked with Bernardo, who is amazing. And I told him, I said, I only have 2 criteria for this beer. Men have to love it and women have to like it. And he nailed it. So and then I, again, took it to a whole different level. I thought, well, wait a minute. Would I rather do a private party for me with 6 kegs of beer, or can we make it bigger? So I went to Metro State and said, what would you think if we collaborated on this project and we split the proceeds? So part of the funding from launching this beer would go to Restoration Ranch, Colorado, and part of it would go to fund scholarships at the School of Hospitality at Metro State. And they're like, we're in. So we launched the beer on National First Responder Day, October 28th of last year. It sold out. And we're still trying to figure out how to partner with a brewery to take this nationally. I haven't given up. And when I say that Restoration Ranch, Colorado has closed, yes, that has. But I think it's giving us time to regroup, rethink, and rebrand how to make this more effective. Because a lot of people, they talk a good game about health and wellness, but to actually get people to come and stay, we would watch this cycle. They would show up, they'd kind of look around and go, oh, this is a lot nicer than we thought it was going to be. And literally by the end of the 2-day stay, when they were there, they were different people. And I remember being at the ranch one time, and there was a firefighter's wife that I was over there doing something and happened to come across her, and she was crying. And I said, I'm not meaning to intrude, but are you okay? And she goes, these are happy tears. I haven't seen my husband this relaxed in a decade. She's like, thank you. Thank you for seeing that we needed this. And then that brought me into the awareness of how unsupported families of first responders are. And one day we had 2 members of law enforcement who were up there with their kids, and the daughters didn't know each other, and they were palling around and kind of talking. And then they walk up to me and go, we need to talk to you. I'm like, okay. And they said, we need to hang out with kids like us. I'm like, tell me more. She said, she knows what a code word is. I'm like, what's a code word? And they were like, well, mom or dad drops that, get up, get out, and go to a pre-designated rendezvous point. I'm going, oh my God. And then the other one says, yeah, and there's a second one. I'm like, what's that? She goes, that means drop to the floor because there's likely to be gunfire. And I was just like, oh my God. And then we initiated the first in the nation day camps for children of first responders. And Ashley Braun co-created the program with us. She has also created the first continuing ed program for therapists to teach them how to work with children of first responders. So the ripple effect of what Restoration Ranch Colorado has created and will continue to create, although in a different form going forward, just makes my heart sing.
Well, good. It makes me, I'm excited for it because there really isn't anything like it out there. I will tell you this though, Kathryn, on a bright note, the world that we're living in as far as in law enforcement is that these agencies are putting a lot more effort and money into our emotional survival. And I think that that's really good with peer-to-peer groups, critical incidents response teams, which I'm on both of those. And I think it's a very, very good thing to think of these officers' well-being and the statistics and so forth. Amanda, let me know when you're ready to throw that video up, because I want to show that 2-minute video that I'd sent you in reference to her talking about the statistics. If you get there, let me know. Ladies and gentlemen, and when she gets done with that, isn't she amazing? You're just you're like you're not even a box of dynamite, you're a truckload of dynamite. That is
I've been called a force of nature, and at the National FOP conference, not this year, but the last year, they labeled me Beth Dutton.
I love it. No, yeah. If you don't know who that is, that's from Yellowstone, and yeah, that's good. You're somebody that we definitely want in our corner in law enforcement. And I've been to Colorado. You speak quite a bit, or I don't know what your schedule's like. So. If what is it that you speak about if you're out there? I'm sure you'd share your journey just like what you're doing here today, but you also talk about, I'm sure you're talking about wellness. And do you talk about the retirement? Because
I do. That is my current passion. So when I did the retirement readiness work, I did it because when Chris retired, I almost killed him. I mean, seriously, I love my husband, but I was not prepared for the emotional crash and burn. This was in 2014 when he retired. And at that point in time, there were very few books about the non-financial aspects of retirement planning. And I just dove in and became a nationally recognized expert in this field. After Chris was killed, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, someone in law enforcement reached out to me and said, are you still doing the retirement readiness work? And I now call it transition preparedness, because retirement readiness sounds like you got one foot in the grave, and I'm not going there. Okay. So, and in this particular line of work, you can be medically retired when you are quite young. So again, I just think it's a misnomer. It's really about change management and transition preparedness. So they said, are you still doing that? And I said, yeah. And they're like, could you do it for first responders? And I thought, I can adapt the core of the materials, but I need to have a first responder co-write the book with me. So Lynette Butler, who is a retired sergeant from the Paterson, New Jersey Police Department, authored the book for law enforcement. And Todd Brown, who's a retired firefighter paramedic, did the fire and EMS version for me. We're still working on one for emergency communications dispatchers, because all of them have slightly different issues and structures that they have to cope with as they leave their careers. And it's, well, we'll talk about those statistics too, because they're not pretty.
Well, let's talk about it now. Amanda, go ahead and throw that video up for me, please.
One of the hardest things for people to understand is the mental toll that first responders go through. When you are exposed to trauma, literally every day, you cannot help but get numb to it. And when I discovered the statistics about what the job does to people, the fact that in law enforcement, the average age of a first heart attack is 42, the average age of death is 57, and that their exposure to toxic, hazardous materials can cause chronic illness, not to mention that they're usually hypervigilant because they have to be. And when we go through those traumatic experiences, being able to find a supportive environment, to work with a good therapist, to have a peer support or chaplaincy team that can help you work through those issues is imperative. If you don't have mental health support to work through those issues, they keep on building and building and building. And then when you retire and you're not going 100 miles a minute and you slow down, you can experience trauma flooding, where all of that unprocessed trauma comes rushing back, and it can be debilitating. That is often what is the precursor to suicide.
Those statistics are alarming. What is the statistics in reference to suicide compared to officer deaths?
Well, what is a unhealthy trend is for the past 10 years running, more first responders have died from completed suicide than died in the line of duty. And one of the fastest growing suicide rates in the United States right now are retired first responders in the second and third year of retirement. Because when you have no purpose, you have no passion, the structure, the camaraderie, the identity that has been your life is no longer there. Unless you figure out how to create a new passion and purpose, the likelihood of you dying prematurely escalates dramatically.
Yeah, for instance, how many months is the average that an officer survives past retirement?
Yeah, at a pre-COVID, their retirement survival rate was 5 years. Post-COVID, 18 months.
Yeah,
that's good.
I'm turning 57, Kathryn, in January. Okay. I want to stick it to the city for many, many years where they're like, is this guy ever going to die? I mean, seriously, that's scary to me. That's why I try to do.
Yes, yeah, it should be. But I mean, once again, what people don't realize, I kind of geek out on this kind of stuff because I shouldn't be alive. I know that. I shouldn't be alive. I have a genetic abnormality that killed my brother, killed my sister, and I've outlived them by almost 2 decades. So I'm doing something right. But what is fascinating is that we live in a time now where there are so many medical advances that we will, at some point in time, be able to choose how long we want to live. And what is interesting also is that all of the new therapeutic modalities that are out there that used to be considered woo science, oh, that's really woo woo, are now mainstream, and they're showing that much of the damage done to the body can be reversed by your brain. And that is something that has fascinated me because I actively practice visualization every day to be able to keep my body healthy. And I think the best example of that was I tripped and fell skiing and I fractured my shoulder. And I was told that the kind of fracture I had would require surgery. And I'm like, nope, not doing that. And so literally every day for the 3 months that I was doing PT and trying to figure out, okay, when are you going to have surgery? And my answer was never. I would visualize the bones knitting back together. And at 3 months, I went to go see the doctor, and he told me, you'll never be able to raise your arm above your head fully ever again. And he said, how are you? And I went, I'm fine. And his jaw dropped. And he was like, what did you do? And I said, I told my body to heal itself. And I visualized my bones knitting back together. And they did. And he was just like, I've never seen that before. And I thought, well, okay, I'm not an anomaly. This is something that now through the field of epigenetics, we know that we can visualize this. And the problem is that we live in a microwave society. It's like, oh, I'd rather pop 2 pills and deal with the symptom than spend a month visualizing, a year visualizing to make this happen. But it doesn't mean that it is impossible. We know it is possible.
Wow. I'd never even heard of that. It's called something. What's it called again?
Epigenetics, epigenetics, epigenetics. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I appreciate the doctor's lack of positive thinking. I mean,
yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm never going to do that. So,
yeah.
I mean, there are so many new things. And again, binaural audio, EMDR. So one of the things I don't think you do know about
I'm
me.
so glad you're talking about this.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah. So I had the good fortune to be working in Belfast, Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles. And while I was working there, the IRA detonated 2,000 pounds of gelignite across from the building where I was working. And I would have been cut to ribbons if I had been in my office. So I finished my assignment there. I moved back to New York City, where I am at the time. And in the late 1980s, we didn't know what post-traumatic stress was. I just knew that every time I would get in the subway and the doors would close, I would think I was dying, and I would have panic attacks. And it took almost 10 years and an eating disorder before I started working with a therapist who said, you have classic post-traumatic stress. And I'm like, what's that? And she's like, okay, so tell me about, your life history. And I start telling her about all the things that have happened to me in my lifetime. And she's like, how are you functioning? I'm like, that's a good question. So she introduced me to EMDR and brain spotting. And after, I think, 3 or 4 sessions, I haven't had a panic attack since. And so I'm grateful that now there are these different healing modalities. There are some people that are advocating psychotropic. I don't, but that's my personal choice and preference. I think my brain is fine just the way it is. But there are so many new ways to treat post-traumatic stress, to reduce it, to contain it into a piece of your brain that doesn't drive every action, every thought, every behavior. And that's why the wellness of our first responder community is imperative because, as you are well aware, people are leaving the field in droves, and new recruits on average are lasting 3 to 7 years max. They are not sticking it out for the 10, 20, 30 of previous generations. Obviously, there are always exceptions to that, but overall, recruiting and retention are much harder than they ever have been. And so that's why I go out and I educate, advocate, and agitate on behalf of the first responder community, because 90% of the groups that I speak to have no idea about this experience. They're like, what do you mean they live 22 years less than the average population? Yeah. They miss birthdays. They miss anniversaries. They miss watching their kids play ball. There are so many things that you miss out on as a first responder, and that not only affect the first responder, but obviously affect their spouse or partner, their children. And this is one thing that, again, nobody's talking about this group, parents of first responders. The couple that were my ranch managers have a son who is a lieutenant in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa Police Department. And they were like, there are no resources for parents of first responders. And I thought, whoa, how could we do that? And then the other thing, again, like I said, there's no box for me to think outside of. But I remember having a conversation saying, why are there no 24-hour daycare facilities for first responders? Gee, I don't know. And what I heard was no municipality wants to take on the liability of that. I'm like, okay, well, let's think this through. So in the United States, we have a shrinking population of schools because the population's smaller. We have lots of schools that are empty. So I'm thinking, all right, many of them are in less than ideal neighborhoods. So why don't you take a school, turn it into a police substation, have a daycare facility inside of it, have a kitchen that provides grab and go healthy meal alternatives, because you know, and I know that if you are on patrol at 3 o'clock in the morning, there aren't a lot of healthy food choices out there for you. And you will never go through a drive-through because of what might end up in your food. When I learned that, I was like, are you me?
Yeah, but Kathryn, what you don't know won't hurt you, because you just have to kind of go. I'm telling you, when I start, I'd be like covering my badge and, you know.
Yeah. But and then
you're right.
Yeah.
You're
and
right.
then take the gymnasium and turn it into an American Ninja Warrior style gym that actually trains you on how to land in funky situations and climb walls and do all this. And I'm like, and just think how fabulous a resource that school would be. And people are like, but who's going to pay for it? I'm like, well, you're paying for it one way or the other, whether you realize that it's a concrete cost or a deferred cost. Yes. So it's like,
I'll tell you what, there's somebody in the audience right now that's just going, it's Laura Touch. Now, if you were to read her name on the deal, it's like Touch or something, but it's really Touch. She's from Louisiana. So they kind of have they pronounce things different, but she's a superstar too. And she's down in Louisiana, and she is a counselor to first responders. And she's like, I got to get to know her. She's great. And I'm like, yeah, you need to get to know her, Laura. She also is a truck of dynamite, and you're going to come out of this with a friend, because she is a huge resource. And I'm glad you're here, Laura. Thank you for coming in here.
Yeah.
I was thinking about you, actually. I was thinking about her while you were talking. I'm like, oh, I got to get these two together. But no, absolutely. EMDR is a huge thing on the scene. I haven't done it. I know I need to. There's something else that I'm going to introduce you to. I'm going to at least mention it to you. And it's called NUCOM, N-U-COM. And I saw that at a I'm going to have the director come on here. I've already told him. I was messaging him today, as a matter of fact. There it is, NUCOM. And basically, I'm telling you, I don't know if you've ever heard of this or not. You probably haven't. I had never heard of it. I was at a conference in North Carolina, and I put on these headphones, and they were talking. They said it's something. It basically gets into your parasympathetic nervous system. And while I was listening to this stuff, and about 10 minutes into it, when I'm thinking, yeah, I'm wasting my time here, that's when I started having a vision quest of like colors in my brain. I mean, I'm looking at like a tree that looks like the tree from Miyagi-Do karate on the back of a gi with like purple clouds rushing through. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to open my eyes because maybe it's me just forcing this to happen. And when I opened because we had like covers over our eyes. Right. And as I opened my eyes, it was even more vivid. And I was like, holy cow, it was unbelievable. Yeah. I was like, I felt incredible when this thing was over. So I will definitely get you the information on that because it's something worth exploring.
Thank you. No, I would love that. And I had the same experience the first time I listened to binaural audio. I thought I've never done acid, but I was like, this must be what an acid trip is like, because colors and weird shapes. And I remember saying to my therapist, what the hell are you doing to my brain? And she says, I'm balancing it. And I went, oh, wow.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, at the beginning of this, just to give you an idea, when they first started, and I'm going to have him come on because I got to have him come on. It's tremendous. But at the beginning of this, of course, that room, what they did is they come in as a vendor. And when they showed up, they've got their zero gravity chairs or whatever for people to just kind of relax and put these headphones on. There was nobody in there. And then by day 2, they started being more people in there. And then by the end of this thing, there was a line waiting to do this. And I ended up doing it like 3 different times. And I was like, every time it was a pretty unbelievable vision quest that I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but something's working. Hey, Brittany, I'm glad you're here. You're one of my faves. All the people that are in here, thank you all for coming in here. Joel, appreciate you. And all the other people, I've seen people in here from places that I have not seen people here from before. And I love it. A lot of newer people. Susan, welcome. I appreciate you being here. Kelly, don't think that I'm not reading you. Nathan, I don't think that and it's not Nathan Schilling, it's a different Nathan, but don't think that I don't read over there. I do. I'm just so excited. I'm so excited. You're bringing up some great stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, there's got to be something to it. That's why a lot of my guests have talked about it. Yeah. And I talk about EMDR and I talk about mental health as far as with first responders at the end of every one of my presentations too. And I've been doing that for years. And so I'm really glad that you're talking about that because that's a big deal. And it's a big deal.
But Jason, I have a question for you. How do we get first responders to do it? We can have all the resources in the world available for them, but if they won't take that first step, I'm like, that's my biggest frustration. And I don't know whether I know that people talk about the stigma of it. Okay, fine. I get it. I really do. But one of the things that through other work that I'm doing, and again, this ties back to the retirement part of it, is that when people leave their careers and they're taking this wealth of institutional knowledge, wisdom, and experience, and it's kind of like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. We've forgotten your name. And like by the time you get to the parking lot after your retirement ceremony, and that disempowering disconnection that happens, I really am curious about creating a network of first responders who are no longer working in the field and having them be a resource to mentor others who are still in the field.
Love it.
Because you again, it's like,
love it.
It's when they were talking about having little kids and grandparents, interacting with each other, it's the same kind of thing. I am not naive enough to think that I understand what it's like to be a first responder. I don't. But I do understand trauma better than most people. And I also understand that health and wellness is a journey. It is something that you start with small steps, and like any change, you resist it because, again, I geek out about the nervous system, But the amygdala's function is to keep us safe, to keep us alive, and it perceives any kind of change as a threat. That's why, as we talk and you start hearing the voices in your head going, don't do that. Nobody does that. And then you have to work on expanding that comfort zone to be able to say, I can hang in this experience and realize it's not going to kill me. Yeah. I can do something that's different. And the other thing that's really different about first responders is your planning horizon. If you're in law enforcement, you're looking at the call that you're on and dealing with it, and then going to the next call that you're on and dealing with that. Your long-term planning capabilities are actually impeded by the work that you do because you're used to thinking in short-term increments. And when you talk about what you're going to do after you do this career, it's actually perceived as a burden because it's one more thing to think about. And with any change, it's not just that one change of, okay, I'm not working anymore. There are literally thousands of other changes that are instigated by that one decision. And it's overwhelming. And that's why I'm trying to create the dialogue about starting preparation for your last day of work in academy, because you need to learn to cultivate relationships outside of your work. You need to have a plan B. You need to be able to develop, again, interests, and to understand that not every civilian is the enemy. I realize I'm a unicorn. I get that, and I fully embrace that. But there are more of us that are out there. And so much, I think one of the best things that I ever did was go to a citizens academy.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
To better understand.
It's great.
Yeah. And I interestingly have just been appointed. I'll say I was, the city of Lakewood now has a ad hoc transparency and oversight committee for the police department.
Okay.
And me and my big mouth got on it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've never been a huge fan of that, but if we had to have one, I would want you to be my advocate.
Yeah.
I would want you on there because I think your mind is in the right spot. I mean, you appreciate what it is that first responders do. You recognize the difficulties and the stresses and I'm glad I remembered this. Tell me a couple of things that happened right after your husband had died that police department did.
Oh, you just gave me goosebumps. Oh my gosh. So, wow. Two stories that I will tell for sure. So I couldn't stand to be in the house where Chris and I were renovating. And as I said, my dad lived three doors down, and I moved in with my father just to just try to get some semblance of normal and my bearings. And on Christmas Day, we had a caretaker for Dad, and I'm in the shower and she knocks on the door and she said, Kathryn, I really hate to bother you, but there's a Lakewood police officer at your front door. And I said, I'm in the shower. And she says, yeah, he says he'll wait. And I went into full-blown panic. I had nieces and nephews that were living in the area in the time. And I'm like, oh no. So I jump out of the shower. I don't even blow dry my hair. I have no makeup on. I throw on clothes. I run to the front door. I open the door and I almost drop to my knees because there are 6 cruisers parked in front of my dad's house with their lights on, and the guys standing at parade rest who came to check on me to make sure I was okay on Christmas. And that blew my mind that they would do that. And the other story that happened was when I was floating this idea of doing Restoration Ranch, I was invited to speak to a gathering of the Colorado Chiefs of Police. And I did my presentation about what I wanted to do with the ranch. And you could have heard a pin drop. And I said that, oh my God, I could hear a pin drop right now. And I was like, oh, that came out of my mouth. Uh-oh. So we went outside and we're standing in the parking lot, and I'm with my buddy Stu, who was the FOP rep. And I was with my buddy Creighton, who was the guy who answered the phone when I called the non-emergency number. And we're standing out in the parking lot, and we're just kind of talking about stuff. And the gentleman who was the chief of police at that time walked outside, and he said, Kathryn, he said, I know we're a tough group. He said, you couldn't see the tears in their eyes, but I could. You touched them. And so I'm standing out there with Creighton and Stu, and Creighton says something about when I was with Chris, and I looked at him and I said, wait, you were with my husband? And he said, yeah, I was with Chris when he died. It took him a year to tell me that. And I said, you never told me that. And he's like, yeah, I know. And he said, Kathryn, I could have had 50 pounds of gauze that day, and I would not have been able to stop the bleeding. And I was just like, and I realized in that moment, he is talking to me. I'm thinking that he's behind a desk and has been sitting there all day long. I did not realize he was triaging my husband. He already knew he was dead. He's telling me all of this, and I can only imagine with the amount of blood loss there was, he's probably wearing my husband's blood as he talks to me. I was astounded. And that really helped me to comprehend at the tiniest level what goes on, knowing that was one call he responded to that day. And I was like, I don't know how you do this job. I don't know how you do it. And the answer is the average person never could.
Well, man, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, did I advertise this right? I'm telling you, you're somebody special, and I'm glad to know you, Kathryn. I'm so glad I reached out to you. And I tell you, I teared up a little bit when you told that story. Shout out to the Lakewood Police Department. Class act.
Yeah.
That's class. And I'm impressed. I know a brand spanking new cop in Commerce City, which is right next door.
Yes.
Jared Keith, he's so new. He's so new. I mean, he's new. He just graduated from their academy.
Oh,
and
my
gosh. I have a soft spot for a lot of Colorado cops. I spoke in Broomfield and Aurora. So I know a lot of police officers in Colorado. So, and all of them have been just tremendous people. So
yeah,
I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you. So if somebody wants to get your book, Amanda, throw the picture of that book up for me real quick. Her book, there it is, Your Countdown to Retirement. And, you know, this is not about the money. It's about other things. It's about taking care of yourself and doing things like that. You know, I want to address real quick. I want to mention something that I had actually mentioned to our police department, to our wellness captain. He's a captain that's kind of over the peer-to-peer and all this stuff. I'll mention two things. One of the things I've been on critical incidents response team for probably 19 years now. And to be on that, you will have had to have went through some sort of a critical incident yourself, and then you exhibited that you handled it appropriately. I've had a number of those over my career. But while I was there, they were like, hey, you need to go to this. They brought this peer-to-peer thing on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm really not into that. And then they kept kind of pushing it on. And I was like, and they said, you got to go to that training. It's mandatory. And I'm like, you know, I think I've pretty much got to the point where I think I'm just done. I think I'm going to leave at this point. I'm really not wanting to do that. And they said, no. The captain goes, listen, I really want you to go to this. And so I did. I went to this thing, and it was a 3-day separate times. It wasn't like 3 days in a row. It was like a couple of a month later or something. We went to another, maybe it was 2. I can't remember, but 2 8-day trainings or 8-hour trainings. And while I went through it, one of the things that, first of all, I took from it is, number one, I was incredibly impressed with the fact that when they did this training, they had first responders that were attending this, that were not only the police department, not just our department, but other police departments that I don't know these guys, but it was great to have us kind of mixed together, firefighters, animal control people, dispatchers. What they really need to add in there is medical examiner investigators, which they don't for some reason, which is really stupid that they don't. It's ignorant that they don't have them involved. They need to, because of all the people that need it, it's them. They're the ones that see more death than anybody on the planet.
That's right.
And so that was one of the things that I took from that. And then the other thing I got to remember, if I remember, it's a good program. It really is a good program. And I think I forgot what the second thing was. That's part of the problem. But
well, one of the things with Restoration Ranch, Colorado, we defined first responders as law enforcement, fire and EMS, frontline medical, coroner's representatives, their spouses. I'm trying to think. Dispatch, obviously. I was trying to think like everybody I interacted with. So dispatch, fire and EMS, law enforcement, victim advocates, frontline medical, coroner's representatives, and the one that nobody thinks about, members of the judiciary. Because they have to look at all the evidence.
You're right. I didn't even think about it. You're right.
And I talked with a judge. He said, you are the first person in my 30 years on the bench who realizes I'm traumatized by what goes on in my courtroom.
That's brilliant. I'll tell you what, I didn't think about that. I had a handful of judges that watched me speak, and I was doing a homicide presentation, and of course they were dazzled because I'm a dynamic speaker. But the fact of the matter is that I was like, golly, I'm so glad I've never thought about that. That's interesting to me. So I don't know. That's really good stuff. Great. What a great episode tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, consider her book if you're on the verge of retirement or not. Matter of fact, you probably should get it way before retirement to prepare for it and not wait till the last minute. Right.
Right.
And if people want to reach out to you, Amanda, throw her email up again. And so if people can reach out to her. And now I noticed on a website that you had a website, and I don't know if it's still active, if it's stuff that I'm sure you still respond to it, but it was stuff that you do programs for people. You still do stuff like that. What is that website real quick?
So, your countdown to retirement.com is the retirement readiness website, and the law enforcement and fire and EMS books are on there. But what I'm most excited about that will actually launch nationally at the end of August is the First Responder Training Alliance, which is firstrespondertrainingalliance.com. And it is primarily retired first responders who already have consulting companies that we are creating a consortium where we cross-market and cross-train to deliver each other's programs so that it turns into a marketing arm and a delivery system that helps you scale your business. And it's a great way if you're thinking about creating some kind of business afterwards where you're going to do trainings, cumulative trauma, crisis intervention, peer support, any of the things that you did well or that you would like to learn more about how to do. I thought, why are we all like rowing our boats alone? Let's all get in one boat and row together and really go fast. Yeah. So that's what's near and dear to my heart right now.
Love it. I'm going to mention this because I did remember what I was wanting to tell you. Is that some of the other stuff, and maybe I'll inspire you on other things. One of the things that drives me crazy about law enforcement, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you retire, you're out of the club. I left homicide recently. I'm out of the club, man. I haven't even spoke to those guys. I worked up there for 17 years, and I haven't spoke to anybody. And I've been gone for like 2 months. So you are out of that club. You're out of the cool kids club. When you retire, it is exactly the same way. So when I was talking to that wellness captain, he was telling me about some things, and he was curious about that Newcom thing because I kept telling him about it. And I was like, you got to hear this, man. This is great. But I told him he was talking about some kind of a deal that he was putting together. And I said, that's great. But here's in my opinion, I think that there needs to be like support groups and stuff in addition to just for like cops that are going through a divorce. I mean,
Oh,
that's about one of the
yes.
worst things ever. And when I went
Yes.
through one. I mean, half of the cops that work here, more than half probably go through it.
Right.
And a lot of times it's because you're working so freaking hard and you're obsessed with the job that your marriage suffers. And so in this particular, I remember back then, man, I didn't have anybody to call. And I thought, and I told him, I said, it would be perfect to have guys, like you said, mentors, people that you can kind of rely upon or just kind of share stories. You know, misery sometimes loves company, really.
Right.
And I'm not saying at the bar. I'm talking about like sitting, you know what I mean? That
Yes.
seriously where you can get together and you can really kind of lean on each other. And there should be more of that. And there really should be groups like that when you retire. And I know that there's some old timers that get together for like breakfast and stuff. There needs to be like the option. Hey, I want to sign up for this and I want to kind of be involved in golf or whatever little
Right.
activities and stuff. And that's something that's very easy to do. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anything else? I don't want to leave it with you having, man, I wanted to say this one thing. If there's anything, there's so much we could talk about. I mean, believe me.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. This has been a blast. But you're 100% correct about the need to create that cohesive community and to be able to do it. For example, on Tuesdays at noon Mountain Time, we have a Zoom meeting that's open to anyone that is contemplating retirement, has retired, is way past retirement. Because again, having a place to come and just talk with other first responders about what you've been through, what you're going through, because what often happens, and you just touched on it, is when you get together and you talk, it's about all the things that you used to be and used to do. It's not forward focused.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going? Yes, my life is passing. Am I making it a life by design or by default? Am I doing things that are building me emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically? Or am I just like existing? Because we only have a short time on this earth, and you want to get the most juice out of it you possibly can. That was why I made a vow when Chris was killed. I would not let this ruin my life. And it hasn't. I have a rich, full, just amazing life. And would I have Chris back in a nanosecond? Absolutely.
Of course.
But now to have had this experience and to have been given this platform to, as I say, educate, advocate, and agitate, to help people become aware of this very incredible, precious resource we have in first responders, we need to do everything we can to keep you strong and healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. You're something special. You really are. Hey, throw her email up one more time. I really, really dig you. I do. I think you're one of a kind. I'm telling you, there are certain special people out. Laura is one of them too. And Laura knows, because I mean, I was like, she almost needed a protective order on me in Louisiana. I mean, I was like a huge fan. But anyway, so I really do appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I want to thank you so much for being on here and coming on this show. And like I said, I may have to, if you got something going on, cooking with one of these projects later on, then you come back, and you're welcome anytime. I'm seriously, we're friends for life. I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. And like I said, tell your friends and family, if you come to this thing, like and subscribe, please. Remember, I'm on Facebook, Detective Jason White. Follow me on there. I'm actually on Instagram, and you might even catch me doing something stupid on TikTok, because I'm on there too. So, no, not really, because I still work for a living. I don't want to end up in timeout at work. But ladies and gentlemen, I cannot thank you all enough. I think that, man, what great stuff tonight. I want to thank everybody for being in here. I'm sorry I can't name everybody, but believe me, I was going through here. I'm going to try to message everybody tonight after I get off of here. Individually, I'll message each one of you. I'll respond to you on this chat room thing. And thank you all very much. Keep doing what you're doing. Do not get discouraged. I know you're not. There's no way. But keep doing what you're doing, because I can promise you this, you have helped more people than you even have an idea of, and you're going to continue to help a lot of people. And hopefully we've inspired a lot of other people that are listening, because we got cops that listen from across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, next week, Mike Breedlove retired from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and he's somebody special too. And it's going to be a really awesome episode that I look forward to. And thanks, Danny, for hooking that up. Danny Couples has been in here. He's working. He's on the ambulance crew in Tennessee. But everybody, thank you all so much. Believe me, I can't mention everybody's names, but I appreciate you. And until next week, take us out, Amanda.